Tonight, the Prime Minister assembles the coalition of the willing in Downing Street. What they call a critical moment for Volodymyr Zelensky. But what can Europe do if Donald Trump is unwilling to have Ukraine's back? A united front today from the French President, the German Chancellor and Sir Keir Starmer, telling the Ukrainian leader that they won't push him to support Donald Trump's peace plan. But is the White House listening? The Foreign Secretary is in Washington tonight. Also ahead in the next hour, leave no stone unturned. The Tory leader, Badenoch, ramps up the pressure on the government over the Grooming gang's inquiry, but faces questions about her own party's record in office. Nurse Sandy Peggy wins a landmark case against the NHS after refusing to share a changing room with a trans colleague. Hot on the heels of Lando Norris's F1 success, the Prime Minister heads to McLaren to push the benefits of apprenticeships. I'll be asking the Minister, Diana Johnson, whether the government is making it harder to employ younger people. And as Keir Starmer praises the hugely talented Angela Rayner and predicts a cabinet return for his former deputy, we'll ask whether it's just the Prime Minister trying to shore up his own position against any potential leadership challenge. All that and more with the Dream Tickets tonight. Dan Dessy and Joe Tanner, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Monday. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening and welcome to the programme. We're going to begin tonight with the war in Ukraine, as the Prime Minister says the push for peace is at a critical stage. So Keir Starmer hosted talks with President Zelensky and European leaders in Downing Street earlier and said he wouldn't push Ukraine to accept a peace deal. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Donald Trump has put the pressure on his Ukrainian counterpart to accept the US's peace plan, which is understood to include concessions on territory that Kyiv will find it hard to accept. Also, it comes as the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is in Washington, D.C. tonight to meet with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and no doubt the war will be high on the agenda. We will, of course, bring you any update on that as we get it throughout the programme. But first, here's our international correspondent, John Sparks, who's got our first report tonight and a warning that it does contain some flash photography.
The festive trimmings were relegated to the sidelines as Europe's senior leadership team made their way to Downing Street. There was only one thing on the agenda here, and that's Ukraine.
Can this peace plan work, Chancellor?
The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, was first to arrive, his demeanour confident enough as Donald Trump tries to impose a peace deal on Ukraine. President Macron came next, mindful that the Americans are running out of patience. These men have been here before, but the pressure on Ukraine is growing. President Zelensky then followed, a man in an increasingly difficult position. He needs all the friends he can get.
There's a hug for President Zelensky from the British Prime Minister. You know, I think this is mainly presentational. It is a big show of public support for the Ukrainian leader. The Ukrainians are getting battered at the front, and the Americans won't pick up arms for them. So what will the Europeans do? Can they keep Ukraine in the fight?
The display of solidarity came with pre-prepared statements. The British Prime Minister pledging unconditional support.
We stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire.
Yet it's not clear what that means in practice. In a telling moment, President Zelensky then acknowledged his country's vulnerabilities.
We can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
The fear that Donald Trump could walk away. But the alternative is also troubling. New US peace proposals may be difficult to stomach.
I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from the US side, but we have to talk about that.
The American leader may not be across the detail, but he knows how to apply pressure. And we saw him do it after his envoys met the Ukrainians for 3 days of talks.
Russia is, I believe, fine with it, but I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it.
Yet these men must grapple with the details of those talks. Does the Donbass go to the Russians? Will Ukraine get a guarantee of future security? For the time being, we got this.
President Zelensky, have you made progress today?
A wry smile and an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the perilous position he's in. John Sparks, Sky News in Westminster.
Well, as promised, Yvette Cooper has and is meeting with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, in Washington, D.C. this evening. These are pictures that have just come in. Of course, this comes as those talks have taken place in Downing Street. The UK government saying they're also going to extend this kind of meeting, if you like, to other European allies by having a call with the latest situation. But Yvette Cooper almost certainly going to be speaking with Marco Rubio in Washington about the war in Ukraine. And it is our major story tonight. And delighted to say on our panel, we have got the chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee, Tan Dessy, and the political comms and strategist and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Joe Tanner. A very good evening to you both. Tan, can we start with you? Yeah. Keir Starmer, Downing Street tonight, saying this is a critical moment. What's your sense of how critical it is?
Well, look, it is very critical, and as our Defence Committee noted, that the UK must show strong leadership in support of Ukraine, and we must reject the concept of peace as conveyed by Russia in terms of they want Ukraine to lose more of its territory and to become completely vulnerable. So I think this is why today was an important moment to show that European solidarity.
But just sorry to interrupt, but isn't the problem here that it's not just necessarily Russia's view of peace? It now increasingly seems like it's the White House's view of peace, which is ceding quite a lot of in fact, the entire Donbass region.
Definitely. I think that's why the UK has a very special role to ensure that we keep the NATO alliance together and that we bring together both the US and European leaders. But there would be considerable alarm bells ringing. I haven't actually deliberated this within our Defence Committee, but the national security strategy that the US put out, the 33-page document, that while it actually acknowledges the importance culturally and strategically of Europe, it also puts the cat amongst the pigeons in the sense that it says, oh, 1 minute, we need strategic stability with Russia. They've been at pains to say where Europe is failing, and that is not what I think many European leaders would have been expecting.
And we'll come on to that in a second. Joe, just on what's happening again today, I mean, it does feel that we're now in this kind of slightly odd dance where, you know, Donald Trump seemingly kind of supports largely Russia's position. European leaders have to step in, whether it's here in London, whether it's in Paris, whether it's in DC itself, to try and convince Donald Trump to row back. And yet we're going around in this continuous circle.
Yeah, and at the end of it, we don't seem to be any further forward. I guess and there is a danger because, you know, Keir Starmer's had this very sort of strategic role. He's been trying to stay close to Donald Trump, but he's also tried to position himself very much in the middle of what's going on with other European leaders and, you know, steadfast support for Ukraine. And we saw, obviously, after that whole debacle in the White House when Zelensky was treated pretty appallingly, and we saw the sort of reaction of other European leaders. I think the problem we've got is we are stuck now. You know, ultimately, it doesn't really matter what the coalition of the willing say or do. There is still a significant reliance on the US's position on this. And this whole sort of back-channeling that Trump's got himself into with Putin means that everyone sort of waits with bated breath for what's going to come next. And we know that obviously Trump is very, very sort of unpredictable, which is
very
said to be one of his strengths, but also thing we fear.
I think a president who's making it very clear that he's incredibly frustrated. For the moment, we will come back to this, Joe and Tan, if we can. Let's bring in Mark Voyager now, if we can. He's the former Special Advisor for Russian and Eurasian Affairs to the Commanding General of US Army Europe. A very good evening to you. Where's your sense of where we're at tonight? It feels like we are yet again here with European allies having to demonstrate that support. But notable, wasn't it, that Keir Starmer said he was not going to essentially side with President Trump and kind of make President Zelensky sign the peace deal the US has come up with?
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having me. Well, I think it's what transpired tonight. It's really a rude awakening for many a European leader who, for many, many months, almost a year now, have been living, acting, expecting President Trump to kind of wake up to the reality of the war in Ukraine as being an aggressive one. And as we saw from the latest publication of the National Security Doctrine, this is not the case at all. And so I've been advocating for quite some time that Europe and Ukraine need the so-called Trump-proof plan, a plan that doesn't rely on the idiosyncrasies of the American president, on the ideologues around him, but actually leverages everything that Europe, especially Western Europe, especially Britain, Germany, and France, can muster in terms of support, military, political, economic, in any way possible to actually prop and support Ukraine in this direst of moments. So this is the moment for Europe to show its mettle with or without the US, apparently without the US, unfortunately.
Well, isn't that the point, Mark? There is an argument to make here that, first of all, Europe's been moving towards that pretty slowly, but they have been moving towards that over the last year or so. Are we not kind of already there? Maybe apart from what I understand, military intelligence, that we are the largest now supplier of weapons to Ukraine. Clearly, we're providing them with a lot of political support. Can that process not now begin where the United States essentially says, we're not really involved in this anymore?
I'm very hopeful that ultimately Western Europe and Ukraine can overcome their dependence on Trump's, as I said, Trump's unstable policies and his affiliation or proclivities, toward the Kremlin. However, the U.S. At this point provides quite a lot in terms not only military intelligence but also the air missile defense assets, the rockets for the Patriot system, especially, which are vital for the protection of the Ukrainian cities, and that's primarily the way Russia fights. It's not only, I mean, they have modest successes to show for on the battlefield along the front lines, but they keep bombarding the Ukrainian cities and their infrastructure. And for this, at this point, I think the Patriot missile system is indispensable, as well as intel sharing, as you pointed out.
Is it also not the case, though, Mark, that in the end, actually, even today, Ukraine do also need a deal? I mean, you look at the desertions we're seeing, as John Sparks, our correspondent, put it, they're getting battered on the front line. Russia are making incremental gains and they show no sign of relenting. That Ukraine also does now need a deal. It needs this war to end, essentially, even with quite a lot of compromise it clearly doesn't want to make.
Well, of course, Ukraine is ready to make a deal, and they've stated this many, many times. Putin is the one that insists on keeping the fight on, and he has no reason to stop at this very moment when he believes that America under Donald Trump is on his side, for all intents and purposes. So he has a good year ahead of him before the midterm elections. So there's no reason for the Russians to stop right now. Yes, the Ukrainians desperately need a temporary respite, but they, as well as everybody else, understands the Russians are going to be back at them, at the first opportunity they have. So it's really, the ball is in the Kremlin's part of the field, not Ukraine's.
As you say, Mark, what's surprising to me is that, I think Europe does get it. It's just not prepared, or it's not able to act together, or kind of waking up and smelling the coffee. As you say, in relation to that national security strategy that was published on Friday, it's pretty clear that the Trump administration don't really see Europe or lots of countries in Europe as allies anymore. They see countries going in directions they don't like. They view the EU certainly not as an ally in terms of as an institution. But that's just where we're at. I just don't understand why has Europe been so slow to react to that reality?
Well, first of all, let me say the doctrine was apparently written by a circle of ideologues surrounding Trump, who share a vitriolic hatred of the liberal policies of Western Europe, of the European Union. They are, of course, isolationist. They are alliance wary, so they are anti-international in any possible way. The Europeans, it seems to be realize that they're still not ready for the upcoming war that Putin will inevitably wage upon all of us in Europe, residing in Europe or living in Europe, if he gets his way in Ukraine. And so my only explanation is that the European leaders are trying to buy themselves time by trying to placate Trump, making happy, in order to keep U.S. assets for as long as possible in Europe while we are reboosting and rebuilding our, European defense systems.
Mark, just finally on all of this, and it's not just you, a lot of people say this, what is your rationale or your sense or the reason you say that Russia's going to launch or we're going to be at war with Russia anytime in the future? I mean, why that? I mean, what's happening in Ukraine? It's been he's been talking about this for a very, very long time. What's your sense? Why would he start invading other parts of Eastern Europe?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that Putin will roll the tanks against Berlin or Paris, or definitely not against London. But, if he does this, tries to repeat his aggression against the Baltic states, against Poland, Romania, Finland, I mean, these are part of Europe and NATO. And so ultimately, Western Europe, Central Europe will also be get involved. Putin wants to payback then, let's put it this way, for the humiliation of the Cold War that he believes the Soviet Union lost because of Reagan's policies, because of the resilience of Western Europe, and so now he sees a golden opportunity while he believes that Europe is divided and weak and unready for war. So this is his moment in time to become the next Russian Tsar and to rebuild in the course of doing this, Soviet Empire 2.0, let's put it this way.
OK. Mark, we appreciate your time, your insight and your analysis tonight. Mark Voyager there. Thank you very much indeed. Joining us from Warsaw in Poland. Let's bring back in Tan and Joe, who are in the studio with me. Tan, you mentioned this earlier on, this national security strategy that was published on Friday. What seems interesting to me, I suppose my point is, don't the Trump administration have a point, which is they've got a certain sense of the world? It's very much out of line with lots of what we're used to in Europe. They clearly don't like mass migration. They don't like the EU as an institution. But they're perfectly entitled to do that. That's what politics is about, isn't it?
Definitely, just to build on what you've just said and also what Mark said, when our Defence Committee recently visited the US, we were left under no impression that the new Trump administration's two key priorities are homeland security and the Indo-Pacific tilt. And what we've got to recognise, which our House of Commons Defence Committee report on the UK contribution to European security highlighted, is that one of the key things is that the UK and European allies have been over-reliant on the US for capabilities. So we need to step up to the mark. And by the way, President Trump's language isn't very similar from that utilised by the likes of JFK. So from the times of President John F. Kennedy and thereafter, people have said, look, Europe must step up to the plate, but we haven't. But now it is important that the government actually launches a national conversation to bring the public along, to highlight the threats. I'm glad that we've got the Atlantic Bastion announcement and also the deal with Norway in particular to actually look at our undersea cables and critical infrastructure, because that's something that, being a member of the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy, we've been looking at, and we are not ready, whether it's in terms of drone attacks, we haven't got an integrated air missile defense system, we are so reliant on the US for capabilities, as is Ukraine.
We've also got no money, so we're not going to get much further along, are we? That's one of the challenges we've got.
Joe, can I ask you just a wider point, the point I brought up there with Mark, because, there are a lot of serious people suggesting that, we are now on an inevitable path to Russia. You've got how much does that, as you sit here tonight in 2025, that you think, wow, is this really going to happen? Are we really... Does it worry you, essentially, is my bottom line?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think there's no question that the world we live in is the most uncertain it's been for a long time. And we're sitting here trying to rationalise the views and the potential actions of two very irrational individuals that are leading very big superpowers in the world. And in the middle of it, we're part of a small group, it seems.
And we are literally in the middle, that's the point.
We are literally in the middle. And also that we've been part of a significant talking shop that it doesn't feel is making any particular progress. And so I think it's pretty scary. And at a time when we have, as a country, we don't have a lot of money. We're behind on big decisions that need to be made. We don't have the infrastructure to build the stuff and make the stuff that we had of old. And if we had to call everyone up tomorrow, what would that look like? I have no idea.
OK, concerning indeed. As the Prime Minister said, a critical day today. For the moment, Joe, Tan, thank you very much indeed. Of course, the war in Ukraine sure to be one of the stories in tomorrow's papers. We'll have an extended press preview from 10:30 tonight with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire and the former First Minister of Northern Ireland. That's Baroness Arlene Foster. Now, a nurse who complained about sharing a changing room with a transgender colleague has won part of her employment tribunal case. Sandy Peggy was suspended by NHS Fife after being accused of bullying Dr Beth Upton at the Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy in 2023. A tribunal found the board had harassed the nurse by taking an unreasonable length of time to investigate the allegation, but other allegations of discrimination were dismissed. Sandy Peggy's solicitor has been reacting to the ruling in the last hour.
The tribunal's findings that Fife Health Board harassed Sandy Peggy is a huge win for a tenacious and courageous woman standing up for her sex-based rights. Safe to say that our preliminary thoughts are that aspects of the judgment are hugely problematic for women, leaving the onus on them to object when their privacy, dignity and safety are violated when men are given access to single-sex spaces.
Let's go live to Edinburgh. Join our political correspondent Amanda Acas, who's been following this case for us today. Amanda, and this is a complicated one because there's obviously the individual case involved. There's the judgments that the Supreme Court have made in relation to this really sensitive issue. And then there's the very fact that lots of these things, not least of all the NHS in Scotland, is a devolved matter too.
Yes, indeed. I thought I should start by taking you over some of the background to this specific case. So Sandy Peggy was a nurse at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy. She'd worked there for some 30 years and she had complained several times in the autumn of 2023 about a transgender doctor, Dr Beth Upton, being allowed to use the female changing rooms at the hospital. Now, Dr Upton is a biological male but identifies as female. But then on Christmas Eve that year, the two of them got into some kind of altercation, a row, when they were both there attempting to use the changing rooms at the same time. And afterwards, Dr Upton accused Ms Peggy of bullying and harassment. She made a formal complaint against her. But then Dr Peggy decided to take her employers, NHS Fife, as well as Dr Upton, to the employment tribunal. And that is what the ruling is that we've had today, this 312-page judgment, and was based on a number of hearings that were held earlier this year in February and July. They called more than 20 witnesses. They had more than 3,000 pages of evidence to pour through. So it clearly was complicated. And what they ultimately concluded is that they've partially upheld her claim of harassment, but they have dismissed a number of her other claims, particularly about discrimination and victimisation, and all of her claims that were directly against Dr Upton. But critically, they've upheld the claim of harassment in the sense that they say NHS Fife should have taken action when she initially complained about Dr Upton's interim right to use the changing rooms, and they say that should have been suspended until the work rotas were changed so that the two of them would never be attempting to use the changing rooms at the same time. They also, as you said earlier, said that it took far too long to investigate her case. But the broader question, as you say, has huge ramifications, because it really is a case that became so high profile because it gets to the heart of the really fraught rows that have been waged for so many years about the conflicting rights between trans trans rights and women's rights, particularly a big issue here in Scotland. Now, the tribunal itself didn't say that it was wrong that Dr. Upton should have been allowed to use that female changing room, but that the hospital should have acted differently when Sandra Peggy complained about it. As you heard her lawyer there highlighting earlier, that's not something that has gone down very well with her legal team and gender-critical campaigners who say it puts the onus on a woman to complain about this situation, which seems rather to go against the spirits of the Supreme Court ruling earlier this year, which found that that sex was a matter of biology under the Equalities Act. But clearly we're still waiting for the government to issue their guidance onto how public bodies should be interpreting that law. And earlier, the chair of the Labour Party, Anna Turley, was talking about this and insisted that that guidance is going to come out in several weeks' time.
We've had the Supreme Court judgment, and the reality is we now know there is clarity in terms of the law on this situation. So the government is going to be bringing forth its code of conduct, its code of practice for government to make sure that the law is absolutely clear and implemented across public services. It's really important that we get this legally absolutely correct and that we make sure that there is no room for any misinterpretations.
Amanda Acast there in Edinburgh for us. We're just going to take you live now to Washington DC. The Foreign Secretary is having a press conference with the US Secretary of State. Let's listen in.
Coming off the visit with the Prime Minister here in October, which we also had a chance to participate in and in follow-up events to it. And we felt very strongly after that we have real momentum. We wanted to do this here before the end of the year to continue to build on that alliance and to continue to build on that momentum that came from that meeting and to work together on our shared priorities, and we have so many. We truly have no better friend. In addition to that strong alliance, we're also deeply committed to the Quad, the concept of, in conjunction with Japan and India, the building out of this Quad, which is something you'll see. In fact, it was my first meeting as Secretary of State. I had been confirmed, sworn in downstairs, and came right up on that elevator and into this room, and it was in this very room that I did my first event as Secretary of State with the Quad, and we look forward to, we think we've had at least 3 meetings this year, if I recall correctly, and we'll continue to build on that in the year to come. We look to do more of those. So we have a lot of things we've worked together on at the direction of the President. AUKUS is full steam ahead, as he said, and I know the Department of War, Secretary Hegseth will discuss that further, has conducted a review, which it's a review about how we can expand this relationship, about how to build on it, so that it can be about many things. And I know we've also signed a landmark critical mineral framework agreement. This is something we share in common, not just with Australia, but with many of our allies around the world, the desire to diversify supply chains, and the belief that in order for us to be able to do anything, whether it's defend our countries, defend our allies, or defend each other, but also to build our economies and to prosper as economies, we have to have critical mineral supplies and supply chains that are reliable and that are diverse and not overly invested in one place where they can be used as leverage against us or our partners of the world. And so this is something that you'll find the U.S. and Australia working very closely on, and it's at the cornerstone of everything we plan to do together in the months and years to come. So I want to welcome you to Washington. Thank you for joining us and agreeing to doing it here. At the end of this year, I know you have many other obligations and places. You're going to be traveling quite extensively in the days to come as well, so we're very grateful that you were willing to come here and join us, and we look forward to reciprocating in the new year by visiting you in Australia, as I look forward to. And it's one of my, I actually have never been, and I need to go. And it's a very efficient trip because I can say I went to a country and a continent all at once. And so very rarely can you say that. So thank you for joining us here today. We're grateful and honored by your presence.
Thank you very much, Secretary Rubio. Can I thank you and Secretary Hegseth for hosting us in this extraordinary room, as you said, where we've had our first Quad meeting after you were sworn in. We're really, Richard and I are so happy to be here, so honoured to participate in another AUSMIN meeting and to build on the very successful meeting between the President and the Prime Minister, and including the historic critical minerals deal that they delivered. Osman was established, that is this meeting was established under President Ronald Reagan.
We're just listening to the Australian Foreign Minister there at that meeting in Washington, D.C. It's a meeting, of course, of the alliance between Australia, the UK and the US, particularly when it comes to nuclear submarines. Vet Cooper is there, and we will return to her when our Foreign Secretary begins speaking. But I do want to move on now to another story this evening, and that is that the Conservative Party have been upping the pressure on the government's national inquiry into grooming gangs today, insisting it must leave no stone unturned. It comes after rows over the inquiry's scope and criticism from survivors over the candidates to chair it. Kemi Badenoch said our draft terms of reference for the government to adopt in the hope that it will speed up the process, but she also faced questions over her own party's record on the issue. As our home editor, Jason Farrell, reports.
With one of the groomers, and I was on his knee driving, and I was like 16 here.
In the Sky News film Prey, an abuse survivor, Scarlett, documented her own harrowing story of being in the clutches of a grooming gang.
There's a video here of me in a hotel just off my face on drugs.
One survivor's tale in what has become a national scandal. Scarlett is now part of a panel of survivors helping the government launch its national inquiry into the issue. But others, disillusioned with the direction of the inquiry, have stepped down. The first of them, Fiona Goddard.
I fought so hard, and it was really, really sad to have to walk away from that.
Yeah. I bet. Yeah.
But my thought was, even if I end up not being involved, it might make them rethink and reconsider the direction they were taking.
But the government's inquiry has stalled after two potential chairs withdrew. And Fiona appeared alongside the Conservatives today as the leader of the opposition set out her own terms of reference for the inquiry.
It must be time limited, and it must consider the role of ethnicity, religion and other cultural factors.
Is this, though, political point scoring? When in power, the Tories had promised to examine ethnicity of grooming gangs and improve data collection.
You've actually had a lot longer than the Labour government to deal with this issue, and the Conservatives didn't do it either, did they?
Well, what we're actually asking them is to pick up where we left off. We did quite a lot of stuff. The ICSI inquiry, you talked about the one that Sajid Javid did, but we also saw many things happening during that period. We had COVID, for example, which delayed a lot of government activity. I can't build a time machine and go into the past and make sure something happened. I can do the job I've been given now. And the job I've been given now is to hold the Labour Party and the Labour government to account. And that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And we're trying to work with them. We're being constructive.
You accept failings on both sides?
Well, if everything had been done perfectly, then we wouldn't have this issue.
Although there were survivors represented here at this press conference today by the Tories, it's also true to say that different groups want different things from this inquiry, and it has become a bit of a political battleground, with Labour saying that they will set out their own terms of reference and that will be informed by survivors.
This issue has plagued towns and cities across the UK, but the decisions on how to progress still sit in Westminster. And what the government needs more than anything is an independent chair who can take it away from politics. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Let's bring in Tan and Joe, who are again with me in the studio. And she's got a point, hasn't she, Tan? Kemi Badenoch. Let's just get on with this. I mean, it's been dragging on for way too long.
No, definitely. Look, what we need to do is to make sure that everything is survivor-centred, that the voice of the victims must be central, and we need to deal with this issue very sensitively. But what we also need to do is to make sure that those survivors actually get justice. Those abhorrent, evil individuals who perpetrated those crimes, they need to be held to account. And as I said on the floor of the House, that we need to make sure that there is no political correctness here. But one thing that I do want to make sure that it's not politicised, and that I do fear with what the Conservatives are doing there, because let us not forget, when they were in power, the likes of Sajid Javid said back in 2018, we will leave no stone unturned. We spent almost £190 million on a 7-year-long national inquiry, an independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. And unfortunately, not all of the recommendations were implemented. So what we need to do now is the government needs to work at pace to ensure that...
They also need to act at pace to get this inquiry up and running, don't they?
No, definitely. I think there are different individuals. I think, as was pointed out in the report, that there are different survivors wanting different things. That it is up to the government, and in particular, I know Jess Phillips feels very strongly about this, and she's the right person to be leading on this work, that she needs to bring those individuals together, and we need to ensure justice.
Joe, do you think it's been politicised? Or has it now got to the situation where, as Tam was pointing out, there's a lot of survivors who've got a lot of different impression on how this inquiry should go, and it's going to prove quite difficult to satisfy everyone?
It's kind of a bit of both. I mean, if you look at things we've had inquiries on over the years, look at one of the more recent ones, the infected blood scandal. I actually did some work on that. And, there were various groups involved in that process that all had different views, felt that certain groups were being looked at more carefully or were being considered, their interests were being considered over something else. You get that a lot. And one of the challenges about this is the fact that, let's face it, the system has let these people down for a long time. Why on earth would they trust anybody? You're right about
isn't that
Jess
the point?
Phillips.
It's the entire system. It's everyone from the police right up to judges.
That's the problem. Some of these inquiries that we've had have seen successive failures over successive years, which means that by the time someone comes and says, here you go, this is what we're going to do, why would you, as a survivor, not fight to get the justice that you feel is right? And we've got Baroness Louise Casey involved, who, I'm a huge fan of. I think there is very little that woman doesn't touch that is not dealt with properly. She's very good at what she does. But, it's a lot of pressure on a small number of individuals. And we're having a debate about, jury trials and stuff at the moment. We're back to this situation of, our system, even when we're looking at investigating and we're looking at inquiries, we're massively inefficient. We're not good at doing these, but they do need to be done. And if they're going to be done, they have to be done properly.
OK, yeah, as you say, it's a really, really difficult issue, undoubtedly, but it is one that many people want the government simply to get on with. For the moment, thank you very much indeed. You're watching The Politics Hub here on Sky News. We'll take a quick break. Up next, following Lando Norris's F1 win, Keir Starmer's put apprenticeships in pole position on a visit to McLaren today. I'll be speaking to the Employment Minister, Dame Diana Johnson, after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub on this Monday evening. Now, before hosting that meeting with European leaders and President Zelensky earlier, the Prime Minister was out and about today to beat the drum for apprenticeships. Sir Keir Starmer paid a visit to a McLaren facility and met with apprentices there on a tour handily timed to follow Lando Norris's F1 triumph. It's almost as if someone in number 10 was watching the F1 yesterday. The Prime Minister talked up the expansion of youth apprenticeships, saying he was on a mission to boost training schemes. It's all part of the government's plan to tackle the rise in the number of young people not in employment, education or training, otherwise known as NEETs. Well, for more on this, earlier I spoke to the Employment Minister, Dame Diana Johnson. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've made this what's called a major investment in apprenticeships. Can I put it to you, it's not that major in the sense that, yes, it's 50,000, I think, over 3 years. I mean, there's 350,000 apprenticeship starts last year. I mean, that's merely a fraction, a drop in the ocean, I might suggest.
Well, I think what I'd say to you is that this package isn't just about apprenticeships, it's about the youth guarantee as well. And what this is about is setting young people up to succeed and giving them opportunities. What I'm concerned about is there's nearly a million young people who are not in education, employment or training. We know that over the last 4 years, there's been a 40% reduction in apprenticeships for those people under 25. So this is a big package of measures. The growth and skills levy, which you've identified, 50,000 apprenticeships, but alongside that youth guarantee, £820 million for that as well, to help young people get into work, to get them ready for work, to support them, and those who are perhaps furthest away from the job market, to actually provide the assistance and help over a number of months to get them ready for work.
Yeah, but isn't the problem here that, you know, even with this apprenticeship scheme, the cost of employing young people, getting them into work, has gone up. You've made it way more difficult, way less attractive for employers to employ young people. You've put up the minimum wage to levels that many employers find unsustainable. You've increased the national insurance on employers for employing people. It's not a surprise that youth unemployment is going up, is it?
Well, what we know is that unemployment amongst young people has been rising for a number of years.
You've made it more difficult. Would you accept that?
If I can just deal with the two measures you've identified there. For under 21s, employers do not have to make any national insurance contribution for under 21s that they employ. So that's one thing. And the second thing that I think it's important to recognise is that the Low Pay Commission are the ones who set the figures for the minimum wage. They've done that for over 20 years. They're an internationally recognised good organisation that provides that experience. They look at what businesses can deal with, what the labour market can deal with. So I think, you know, we've done what most governments, I think all governments have actually identified and accepted the Low Pay Commission's recommendations about wages. But I just want to say, we can't do this without employers. So absolutely, we want to work alongside employers to make sure that they have the skilled young people that they need. And that's why the apprenticeships, making sure the apprenticeships for those young people, the foundation apprenticeships, are really where the focus is, to give young people that experience to then get them into work and into careers.
If this is the carrot, though, does the government also need a stick? Does it need to look at the welfare that young people are on? That if there is a million people essentially not in employment, education or work, that actually, or in education, sorry, that you need a stick.
Well, absolutely, and that's why we got the youth guarantee. We're saying to young people, we will get beside you and support you, help you through writing CVs or whatever it is you need.
No, but as in terms of like, if you're welfare, I think you guys are looking at welfare, aren't you, for young people?
We are looking at welfare, but what I was going to say to you is that we would expect young people to comply with the conditions around the youth guarantee. So, for example, if someone's been on universal credit for 18 months and has not had a job, not got into work, we will provide them with a job, a subsidised job with an employer. We expect the young person to turn up and do the work. If they don't, there will be sanctions applied to them. So this is a social contract. We will help and support you. We want you to do well and succeed, but you have to also comply with your side of the bargain.
And just very finally on this, there was criticism, wasn't there, when Tony Blair first launched his kind of ambition of getting 50% of people going to university, an ambition that you guys have now abandoned.
Well, no, we haven't abandoned it. We've said 2/3 of young people should be going into higher education or a high-quality apprenticeship.
You've certainly made university a lot less attractive. Has the pendulum swung too far? I mean, Students are swimming in debt that's continuing to rise unsustainably for lots of them. You've done a tax raise on universities, they're not very happy. You seem to be on a concerted effort to boost apprenticeships and to do down universities.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. And as I said, the Prime Minister was clear. There is obviously a place for young people going to university, but equally we need to focus on the high-quality apprenticeships that we need, because we know particularly technical apprenticeships in the industries of the future, AI, are really going to be important. So he said two-thirds of young people, university or high-quality apprenticeships.
If you were a parent watching this programme tonight with, a son or a daughter looking at this, there's no way you'd send them to university, would you? Well, to get into tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. By the way, potentially to earn a wage that will be lower than some of these apprenticeships.
Well, we know overall that graduates earn higher than if you haven't gone to university and got a degree. We know that's a fact. I do think, though, the apprenticeship route is now is very attractive for the exact reasons you've identified. You can earn and learn at the same time. People do well on apprenticeship.
Can I just talk on two other issues tonight, if I can? Just first of all, what the Conservative leader was saying today about the grooming gangs inquiry. Of course, you were a Home Office minister. You know very well about this issue. I mean, it's not just embarrassing anymore. I mean, it's awful that we're still not at the stage where this inquiry started.
Well, I think we all recognise this is a dreadful stain on society, what was allowed to happen with the grooming gangs. It's absolutely right, we have a statutory inquiry. I know there will be updates very soon on that. But this isn't a party political issue. This has to be something that all...
How soon?
Well, I can't... I'm not in the Home Office anymore, I can't comment on that, but I do know that there is work going on at this very moment. But this is not a party political issue. We all, as members of Parliament, want to make sure that there is justice for those people who were abused by those appalling people, those evil men who abused young women. That has to be
But
right.
you agree with Kemi Badenoch that the government needs to get on and do...
Well, we said we're having a statutory inquiry. The Prime Minister was the DPP when he led the first prosecutions of these leaders in these grooming gangs. So there is a real... And I know Jess Phillips in the Home Office is very focused on this, as is the Home Secretary.
OK, and just very finally, also a story that has developed today, and there is a major news story, which is around Sandy Peggy, who has won her case in Scotland against NHS 5. Let's talk about this individual case. We can talk more widely about a sense that actually lots of institutions in this country, big institutions like the National Health Service, are not implementing the Supreme Court's judgments. Do you have that sense of frustration?
I think it was really clear earlier in the year when the Supreme Court handed down their ruling what sex was. It was biological sex, not legal sex. It's now a matter for organisations, businesses, companies to actually implement that ruling from the Supreme Court.
But your message to them is to get on with it, is it?
I think that organisations and businesses need to get on with it. The law is clear. You're talking about an employment tribunal, which is one of the lowest levels of the tribunal and court system in this country. The Supreme Court is the top court. They've made the ruling. That's what now needs to be implemented.
And you think, obviously, Labour's made the right decision when it comes to the Women's Conference. I mean, are you happy that Labour are now listening to this issue? Because, there's been a big gear change within the Labour Party on this over the last couple of years.
I'm very pleased that the Supreme Court made the ruling that they did. It's now very clear what sex means. It's biological sex. That's what we need to look at. And I'm not surprised, actually, with the Peggy ruling up in Scotland, although, obviously, health matters are a devolved matter for the Scottish Parliament. But I think the Supreme Court, we're very clear now, this is the direction of travel.
OK. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. You're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Up after the break as the Prime Minister gives a strong hint at a comeback for Angela Rayner to the Cabinet. She makes a well-timed Commons appearance this evening. We'll be talking about Rayner returns after the break.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on. Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir. Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them, why quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Thank you very much. Okay, but
Listen,
I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes we have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shot's running out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcasts.
The trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation.
Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
Craig. Very welcome back. Now, could Angela Rayner be about to make a comeback into government after a relatively short time out in the cold? The former Deputy Prime Minister resigned only a couple of months ago after it was found that she'd breached the ministerial code by underpaying stamp duty. But in the clearest indication of a comeback yet, the Prime Minister said in an interview with The Observer at the weekend that Miss Rayner would be back in the Cabinet, describing her as a huge talent. Well, another person who's probably not likely to return to the Cabinet or has never been in it, but is a huge talent, is our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's alongside Joe and Tan tonight. John, very good evening to you. Always a pleasure. And Angela Rayner's been speaking tonight, hasn't she?
In the last few minutes, yes. MPs are debating yet again this employment rights bill. We're in the middle of well, the government obviously hopes not in the middle of ping pong. This bill has been back and forth from the Lords 3 or 4 times now, and the government is desperate to try and get it onto the statute book, hence the concession they made to the Lords. And a few minutes ago, Angela Rayner, tipped for a cabinet comeback, showed Labour MPs what they've been missing. A barnstorming speech in support of the bill, cheered by her backbenchers. This was the peroration at the end of the speech.
It has been a battle to pass this bill, but progress is always a struggle that we fought for. Its passage will be a historic achievement for this Labour government. It will benefit working people now and into the future. Now is not the time to blink or buckle. Let's not waste a minute more. It's time to deliver.
I'm not going to lie, John. I think your introduction to Angela Rayner was more barnstorming than the speech itself. They picked the wrong segment.
It cut out, actually. There were cheers at the end of the speech. It was a very good speech. I mean, to me, one doesn't like to be harsh or critical of the young minister who made the speech, but Kate Reardon, her name is, a new minister at that department, ex-trade unionist.
But Angela slightly outshone her, did
she? Indeed, yes.
What do you make of all of this?
About 12 people in there. It didn't look like it was packed to the rafters.
I mean, it's pretty clear that I think the Prime Minister would like her back in Cabinet. Maybe, dare I suggest, because it's quite good for him.
Well, he couldn't say he wouldn't. I mean, it's one of those, if it comes up, you have to show that, it's with regret that she left. And I think he made that point at the time. And she is still a very big figure for the Labour movement. There's no question. And this is at a time where he's got Labour together, this sort of supportive group that helped get him into the leadership, apparently canvassing its sort of supporters, asking who would be the next leader. I mean, he's operating in very difficult times. So ultimately, they always say you should keep your enemies closer. Whether she's a genuine enemy or not, we'll wait and see.
Wow. Are you a Rayner's man?
Look, Angie is an absolutely very talented, hard-working individual. I've worked with her before, so I know just how much of an incredible figure she is, despite John picking the wrong segment, I think, for that.
Would you like to see her back in cabinet?
I think that she or whoever did, John. But either which way, I think that she would be brilliant back in the cabinet. But also, look, let's not forget the amazing backstory that she has. She's an incredible communicator. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not the Prime Minister, so you'll have to ask him that. Yeah.
OK, John, what's interesting for me here is that our politics has become TikTok. I mean, dare I say you've been around for a long time. When cabinet ministers resigned, it normally meant they probably would never come back again, or at least they'd be out for years. It does feel, have things sped up a little bit? Is that fair to say?
Some did come. I mean, going back, OK, so I became a political correspondent in 1982, the year of the Falklands War.
This is your life, John Craig.
But I mean, certain politicians who have had to quit in, shall we say, in disgrace. Cecil Parkinson came back after quitting over the love child with Sarah Keyes.
How many times did Peter Mandelson come back?
Yeah, look at how that ended. That ended badly, didn't it? Yes, you're right. Mandelson was forced to quit twice. Once the first time was the mortgage, the second time was over the passport application, came back, then became the ambassador. It didn't end well, though, did it?
But it feels like a long time since, like, John Profumo, for example, where that's it, it's all over.
Yes, and he went and did good works for charity and all that sort of stuff.
Well, that's also true. I mean, that's the thing. In the end, isn't the bottom line here that Angela Rayner maybe shouldn't have had to resign?
Well, the question is how long do you
it's like
stay out of government?
Purgatory sentence.
If something happens, look at someone like Louise Haigh, who would probably say, "Hang on a minute, should I not have been in, given that what I did was a long time ago?"
I tell you where you are
versus
correct.
Angela Rayner, who was something much more recent. So it's how do you judge these things?
Where you are correct, there used to be a view that you didn't come back until after the election, general election, when you'd been endorsed by your constituents and voted back in.
Well, I suspect we will see Angela Rayner back in the cabinet before the next election, and all I would say in retention to that is I think she could be the next Labour leader. No? Yes, no?
Oh.
No? I would say where we are right now, it's a battle between her and Wes Streeting.
Well, apparently it's an illustrious group, isn't it? Apparently there's plenty of people that are being canvassed as to whether they should be the next...
There's too much speculation, Darren. There's too much speculation. I think there's no vacancy at the moment, but we'll see in the future.
John, it's been a pleasure. Joe, Tan, it's also been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. That is it from me for tonight. We're back, of course, tomorrow at 7. Up next, it's Sarah Jane Me on the UK Tonight with a special programme on the impact of birth trauma. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Good evening. Bye-bye.